We're here with Fortesa Softa and Redon Softa. They're both architects. They're both brother and sister, siblings. They are musicians. And today they're here with us to discuss about one actually of our hypotheses of the bites of transformation, which is the growing urbanization and what impacts it's gonna have on how we consume food and on food production. So I'm gonna leave the word to you, guys. So
Yeah, Ludo, thank you for having us. Hi, Forti.
Thank you.
From the distance.
Hi.
Because of the color restriction, Forti, it's distance from us. Yes, shortly, briefly, we are siblings. We have a third sister, which is also architect. We are a family of architects, actually. We have two parents which are architects. And so we grew up all our life, actually, by being in these fields of multidisciplinarity, architecture and music and all the stuff. And Forti, it's diplomated in the Polytechnicum of Vienna. I'm doing the same route. Actually, because of the COVID restriction, it's blocked a little, but we are on the way. And yes, we founded together last year this group of ours, which is Laboratorio Softa, in which we try to represent a way of approaching the different fields and disciplines, which are architecture, music, arts, urban design, and everything else.
okay. And
What, do you want to add something?
No, I think it's just it cannot be said as but for us the important part, and maybe the reason we all became somehow architects, is the interdisciplinarity of it, the chance we have to mix so many different subjects, because it's part of what architecture is. It's the soul of architecture, basically. And so also all these different interests that we grew up with, they could be at the end be channeled through this lens of architecture that has as a subject, which is so wide and important, has in itself the ability to tackle every single aspect of human life. And it's not one of those subjects where there's an absolute right or wrong, which is also the difficulty of it. But the important thing, the only thing that you can do basically is have an approach. And so that is what we are trying to create for ourselves, like our approach towards architecture and life, basically. So again, thank you very much for this very interesting subject you proposed to us, because it's always very important to create different connections between our subjects and the different ones in order to be always more complete and coherent in what we say, because it's so complex and wide.
thank you guys, for being here. And so let's break the ice. So what do you think is the main link between architecture, how a city is planned, and actually the way we consume food or we produce food, and the relation with food system, basically? So it's a super wide question, and it's just to open a little bit the discussion with you.
We talked about this topic in the last days since you gave us the call, and we thought actually together it would be interesting to break the ice of the discussion by trying to bring out actually a frame of a context of discussion, and this way it is maybe important to start from the question of what is actually necessary for us for living, and actually what is necessary for us as human beings, and by that point we broke down actually to some aspects, which are the shelter, the water, the air, and in the end the food. So if you really reduce everything, you arrive at this point. Like everything else, maybe it is important, but it is not for surviving in the right moment. So that's actually like reducing everything to the really bottom. And air and water, in a way, even if I say it from a Western perspective, it is generally considered, if you think about the pandemic momently, everything blocked, everything like turned down, air and water, it's still available. So it's like a resource which we still have. But food and shelter, it's actually something that cannot be guaranteed, or we don't have the guarantee that it's going to be always there. And in fact, if you think during the pandemic, in the real beginning, when everyone was shocked from the situation, didn't know what is happening, the governments and all the media started talking about, no worries, we're going to have the food in the shelters. So everyone just started to panic. Oh my God! From being we have the food, to the next day we don't have the food maybe. And so it's important to see that those two topics are already, just from the bottom line, really, really related. So the shelter and the food. And so
yeah, I think what he's trying to say, maybe going, because talking about the pandemic is really easy right now because it's one of these extreme events that make everything bigger and easier to understand for everyone because it touches everyone. Food and shelter are the basic needs of humankind. You can go back to the origins of humans, and like community and the need and the evolution, it goes through two of these big topics, that is food and architecture and shelter. Basically, it's like defending yourself from the outside and providing for yourself in order to live, basic necessities. So that's it's like two very important subjects, extremely connected together, that maybe not always are actually talked together because
yes.
yeah.
And you believe that the pandemic and the situation we all lived, maybe, for example, if I can imagine for myself, I started cooking much more. Of course, I have a garden at my place, so I started gardening much more. And I feel that's somebody that was deeply shared by a lot of people in my network. Do you believe that somehow the situation that we've been living maybe is going to have an implication in the way that our houses are built, or our cities are actually imagined in a way that we're going to be more reactive somehow in this kind of situation? So we somehow leave the situation that, of course, minimize, but people would leave somehow. Some delivery of food were stopped, some delivery of stockages were stopped. So we really realize how we are connected by others, producing what we eat and what we consume. And I think that's been a awakening aspect for all of us.
I think it's definitely safe to say that the pandemic, which can be seen as a trigger, actually, like it triggered some of the situation that were already there, but it pushed them to go faster, or maybe better said, to create an awareness of in which situation you find yourself, and maybe well said, of the necessities that you have. So an awareness of the necessities that you have, or the awareness in the situation that you are in your urban space, in your home, or where you live, or actually what do you have or what do you not have, because everything, as we said, blocked just in a
Yes,
moment.
I agree that, as you said, to consider the pandemic as a trigger, or even better, a case study, because it's one of those moments that you are forced to put things into perspective.
Mm.
And I think this contextualization of the topic is also very important, because it's such a wide topic anyway. So if you don't put a little bit of a frame around it, it's very difficult to talk about it. If we talk about change and what the pandemic should do, maybe, or is doing, um, leaving apart are the tragic aspect of it, which has overwhelmed all of us today. And I think a very important way to see it is see the pandemic as of a part of a bigger picture, of a part of historical time where something was already happening. I think we have to
Yes.
look at from a wider perspective, because we are actually in the middle of a digital revolution, just as it was the agricultural revolution, just as it was the in this industrial one. We are in the middle of a digital revolution, and the pandemic is maybe an opportunity and a trigger to speed up some processes that were already happening. And so seeing it as an opportunity is for sure maybe a very productive way to interpret it. And the digital revolution is within us, and maybe somehow we weren't even aware of it. So what Redon was saying, that the pandemic has forced us to have awareness, is a very contemplative way of seeing it, because I think it's very true. Because throughout, every one of us throughout this whole last year has been thinking, what are our basic necessities? What is it that I need, and what can I leave outside? And this has, I think, brought up some very deep philosophical issues already. And that um, if you go back to the basic necessities, you come back to this issue of architecture, of urbanization, of city, and shelter, and of food, because it's what we need to live
Yeah.
for.
And so, if
Maybe,
you
yeah.
learning from this experience, and if you would have to project yourself in the future, how would you see the right construction of a house, of a city, in order to be able to respond to all our basic necessities, to really link them together in a better way?
I think catching up with what Forti was saying, it is actually really understanding what are those necessities. So it's really hard to give. There is no actual perfect solution, because it is, in a way to say, since it is so transcendental as discussion to give an answer to the human beings itself, like how is the human beings going to be in the future, and who is the human being. But we can surely address some topics and some situation, maybe by examples. And catching up again with the discussion of awareness, I think many persons, maybe even some of them that listens to us, on me myself, I live the same situation. We are really used to live in our society, and I think it's safe also to say this, that we are used to see our house not so much as a real shelter, but as a point to spend a temporary time. And I've seen this so much in many friends also, that they always talk about they want to travel, they want to go, they want to see, they want to be. And this brings the people to the idea that really often when you go home, you sleep, you do your stuff there, and then you go out, because actually life is outside, which is in a way right. But then it happens something like this, and everybody is stuck at home, and you start to realize that maybe what you have at home and how you live at home is not actually what you really need as a necessity. And it is important to define two different terms, which are survival and beneficial. So there is something that is defined as minimum, which can be for the survival. And then we have different kind of things that are accessible, definitely accessible, food, housing, designs, stuff, everything. But it is maybe not accessible to everyone, even if it is the beneficial one. Making an example, maybe you go to the groceries and you know that by your awareness that a food is better than another, but you don't have the accessibility. Even if it is accessible in the shelter, you cannot buy it, maybe, because you don't have the possibility to make a grocery shop by $200 bucks. I don't know, something like that. Just saying. And in the same situation, maybe in housing, you know that it is more beneficial to have more space or more volume, to have a roof which is higher, so that you have more air volume inside in your space. But actually, you can afford it, maybe.
But so then, how would you link that? So in a future, how would be the perfect combination? Could you imagine some examples on how you could link your own environment with what you actually need as a human being in order to achieve this well-being?
I think we were having this
Can I
discussion about
continue?
society and maybe
Yes,
Boti.
because it's an issue that has to be tackled from the individual point of view and from the collective point of view, just as is architecture and just as is every other aspect of human life, basically. So we have the city scale in terms of concrete and practical issues that need to be dealt with. The city is like a living, breathing organism, and in it you have vital organs, you have non-vital organs, you have blood, you have transportation and the nerves and everything. Everything is connected, but it is made up of so many different things that can be maybe in different scales, a neighborhood, or maybe your own house. If you see it from a point of view, like this pandemic has brought us into a more has forced us to think in a more individual way, maybe because we had to find solutions individually for the problems we had, because we could only rely mostly on ourselves. So I think as for the change things has brought us, if we think about green and food and agriculture, everyone, I think, and this is very interesting, has found an intuitive solution to it, and that was bring what you can't have to yourself. So it was bringing garden vegetables into our own house. um, it it was and it is, everyone has noticed, a basic necessity, not only for your physical health but also for your mental health. So these two go together. um, so we have come to the agreement, I think, everyone, that these are part of the needs that everyone should be provided for, but not everyone has this opportunity. Not everyone has this opportunity because there are limited access to resources or accessibility, or you don't have the means to it. So this brings us to a question that is, should we think from the scratch about what a single individual, what is the personal needed space of a single individual? And I use this example, it's a metaphor actually, but I think it's very nice, and it's a personal thought actually. um, Architecture is made of a very complex um, train of thought and of doing things that not only have to do with the planners, but also with laws and everything that you are allowed to do. Now, as architects, we build, it's like as if we built with a Lego box made of small Lego pieces. And so when you usually have an architecture in, sadly, what is today a business-led society, only that has the only goal of um, money gain and, yeah, of profit. It's a profit-led society. You as architect, in 90% of the cases, you have a lot, and then you have the rules that apply to this lot. So the distances from the border and stuff like that. And since you have to make the most profit out of it, you have to use all of it. You automatically basically have the volume that is given from the laws, from what you are allowed to do. Now, in it, then you can take this small Lego bricks. And since you want to have the most profit, you take the smallest one and you try to squish everything inside it. So very often we are forced to do with the bare minimum that is legally allowed. That makes maybe some spaces that are so small that if you think about it with your own hat as a planner, as an architect, you don't think that that should be allowed actually. Like an 8 square meter room is not a living space, but the law allows it. So you do it because the stakeholders or the investors, they need profit from it. So you're trying to find a compromise in that is very difficult. So this Lego box is mostly, even though there have been some updates from some pieces, is a Lego box that we use basically from the 60s. And that's a lot of time ago. What I think is that we should rethink and build a new Lego box with new bricks that maybe say, we can't have these small pieces anymore. We need bigger rooms, bigger spaces, bigger heights. We need maybe in terms of digital evolution and how things have to go long term, since the world has been and is so flexible, should be so flexible. Should we have maybe a room that is mandatory inside the housing unit, that is a flexible room, maybe a working room? Is that a basic necessity? Just as maybe we build small kitchens when we can. Should we think that maybe kitchens should have a bigger space in order to have, let's say, is having personal vegetable garden and like hydroponic kitchen inside your house? Like, is that a basic necessity? Um, so these are very
Exactly.
small things in conception, and I'm talking about the smallest scale, because you have to go to, in order to tackle the bigger problem, you have to go to the smallest scale possible
Mhm.
and to analyze it from that point of view. So I think that's extremely important.
I think what is really interesting on what she's saying, she brought like some real concrete examples about surface and redefining the minimum surface. But in the end, I think we are all we agree that if there we go after with the same society system of working and living, then even if you want to do these changes, even if you realize that maybe they are a necessity, it's not going to change. It is something that has to go hand by hand
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime. So maybe as in urban design and urbanism, it happens really often. You go from smaller scale to bigger scale, different scales. You have all the time like to go through these scales to manage to find the right intersection between everything. And we were talking about spaces, and I was talking maybe before about the discussion of being at home and seeing the houses temporarily and not maybe as a refuge.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we have also to start to change, connected to what Forti was saying, the way society sees actually the week through.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do during the day, are you going to work all the day long? Are you going to work every day, or you have one day off?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you have some time during the day that you can spend to do all the stuff. And I think this is one of the most important, interesting things of what happened during the pandemic. And you actually said, like in the really beginning, you said I was home and I started baking. And I think you weren't actually just the only one that did that, and I did it too. The third sister of ours, she made like a restaurant at home actually. But it's really interesting because everyone realized that had more time in a way. And so you have to question yourself, where did the time come from?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think that the people that work at home, they did that time because they work less. I think there are people and even students that had to work even more.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe in the way we live, we managed to get more time, but related to the movement that we have during our day. And this is strongly connected to urban design and to urbanism and to how we live in a city, because we move in a city in
Mm-hmm.
the end. It's a space in which we move around. So it goes from something really, really simple as the movement from your home to the workstation, to moving around the city. And what I wanted to what I'm trying to say is that if you need during your day of work 3 hours to go at work to go back, those 3 hours you're gonna lose them during
Of
your
course.
day of life. And I think the pandemic forced the people to realize maybe this, and it forced also the people to be more introspective.
Mm-hmm.
And because when you are at home and you had to be at home and maybe you couldn't go outside, it was really, really interesting. We have seen it also in hometown in Lugano in Switzerland. The people all around in the neighborhood were interacting with
Mm-hmm.
each other, even from the balcony. People that never interacted, never talked around. So it could be that we have also to change, by changing the structure of the city, by changing the structure of how we plan our day to go. That means living, eating,
Mm-hmm.
working. We can stimulate like having more time, eating better, or we can stimulate the people to have more collective moments
Uh-huh.
and to speak to each
So
other.
if I can resume a little bit, the idea is somehow to use this opportunity, of course, like we tend to see the positive, we try to see the positive of
Yes.
this COVID situation, and somehow reset our priorities and somehow build the cities based on what is actually needed for our well-being. And I think that's somehow what came out of this discussion, and I think it was very interesting, and I thank you so much, both of you, for this very relevant discussion. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Redon. Thank you, Forti.
Thank you.
Hopefully,
Hopefully, we have the opportunity to discuss in the future what happened.
Yeah, how you
Yes.
change your kitchen based to this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you again for this opportunity. It was very interesting.